Hello, beautiful women of the Vision Builders community. I am just doing my little check, as I always do, to make sure that we are showing up properly in the group. And here we are. Here we are. Good
Yeah.
morning. Morning. I am so excited to be coming in today with Dana Grant. But before I introduce you officially, what I want to do is just take a second to set the scene for today's interview and for this space in the Vision Builders community. So just allow yourself to be here. Please take a cue from Dana, have a cup of tea, turn off all distractions, shut the door, and just take this beautiful opportunity to lean in and tune in to the story of one of our beautiful sisters here, our global sisters right across the world. Hear her story, and you can see in her story the mirrors, the threads that tie us all together in our struggles and our successes along the way. So, Dana Grant, thank you so much for being with us here today. I didn't even ask you what part of the States you're in. Where are you?
I am in Northern California.
Okay, so you're coming into spring and it's warming up for you, which of course we're in the opposite, we're in
Well,
autumn.
you would think it was, but we're in California right now. So if you've been following, we are in some kind of torrential rain season. But I'm looking outside right now and the sun is beginning to shine. I think we're headed into it. It's lovely. It's lovely.
I think the seasons have all moved at least a month. I feel like we're just
Oh,
warming up.
yeah.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dana, you are an intuitive life coach, which we're going to get into as your beautiful story unfolds. But
Yeah.
as we are doing in this series, what I want to do is take us back in time. Let's go back in time to who was Dana when she was a delightful young woman launching herself into womanhood, leaving school. Did you have a
Mm.
sense of what you wanted to do and who you were at that point in your life?
That's a really good question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. But as I look back, when you asked that, what I saw was a terrified young girl with no that I had ideas. I came from a lovely home, a broken home with divorced parents, but there wasn't a plan. So I think in my generation, I'll be 60 this year, is that you went out on your own and you just figured it out. Where in my mind, I thought I was going to law school and there was a trust fund. I had an image of the space that was held for me. And when it came down to it, I graduated and I was out on my own. So from that moment forward, I graduated very young. I was 16, so I was out on my own. Um, and that was terrifying. So I think I launched into terror and I looked for safety from that moment forward. And I really didn't have the luxury, even though it looked and appeared that, I was homecoming queen, all those things, valedictorian, that I had everything going for me. I didn't. I was stumbling and always looking for what was going to keep me safe.
It's interesting, isn't it? I feel like there's so much messaging and beliefs that are instilled in us that like
Right.
like a successful life is so dependent
Right.
on something external. It's so dependent on getting this degree and these marks and this much money and that kind of
Yes.
partner. And, like everything is external. Well, that was definitely my experience. And
Yes.
like you, I left school like I'm stuffed.
Right. I mean, who taught us how to look within for safety or with answers? Yes, external. I was looking for safety outside of myself or validation or love. And that took me years and years before I woke up. I would say 40s before I actually had been betrayed enough that I recognized that, as we discussed a little bit earlier, the core wound of safety layers with betrayal and abandonment before I learned that I had to hold space for that. I had to heal, and that there was no spiritual bypassing, that I had to feel all those incredibly painful things with an enormous amount of loss along the way and betrayal.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't, there's that element that wishes we could bypass all the pain and all the struggle, but the
Oh,
reality is
yeah,
we wouldn't be the women we are today if we hadn't have gone through that. So
exactly.
this is, I don't know if you've got children, but this is part of the children that we're raising in the world and the desperate desire to save them from any pain and struggle, but it's actually not serving them.
Well,
Anyway,
interesting you say that, is I have three daughters, and it's 25, 34, and 35. So at each stage of my healing, I see what they're coping with now. And at times it breaks my heart. But the best thing I can do is, like my saying is always, when we know better, when we know better, we're required to do better. And I know better now, so I stay consistent with my commitment. My commitment is breaking generational trauma. And we hear that all the time, generational trauma. I had serious generational trauma. And my showing up and healing that was, there was some mockery at first of, oh, you're never going to do it. I mean, I had a track record of being oh, I was a yeller. I was a control freak. I was a perfectionist. I didn't have any idea how I was showing. I just knew that if I controlled everything, I would be okay. But I passed that on to my daughters times three. So they each show up with a different part of me that I see reflected, mirrored back at me. So I hold space now for the healing and for the forgiveness and for the understanding. And I can only lead by example. And I think I've done it long enough to where they now trust it. But did they trust me before? No. Could they trust me to yell at a waiter or road rage? They could trust that.
yeah,
I look back on that and I don't shame myself. I love every part of me that got myself here, because I got myself here.
yeah.
I could still be that terrified. I was never a mean woman. I was a terrified woman. And that's what I think they see now, is the healing that's taken place.
Our children do choose us, Dana. I do believe that.
Yeah.
They're here. They learn as we learn, and we're all growing together. This idea that
Yeah.
you become a parent, you've got it all sorted. It's yeah, it's fantasy.
Yeah. Fantasy. It's and the wake up call at 60 is, we never stop learning. I'm going to be a student of this universe forever. And I don't desire to stop. It's just a constant growth process where I believe I'm growing with them as well.
Yeah. I call it life university. It's
Yeah.
relentless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what were your first steps into the workforce from 16? How did you kind of move through there?
Well, as I said, it was survival, survival of the fittest. I wanted to achieve. I had an idea of what success looked like. And so I really pursued that. I had an idea that if I got married and I fell into things. I don't think I ever understood that I was creating anything, because what that inner child wanted, and she was leading the show, was safety. So the woman I was becoming just followed her lead, because she was screaming much louder than I was. So I think that I was married. I always say 3 years and 10 months, because I called in. I think we always call in what we need uh, to grow. I didn't see it at the time, but 3 years, 10 months, and I fled with two daughters. And I worked interestingly enough, as a lobbyist for many years, which required me not to listen, to power through. I utilized all of that trauma to set records that are still unbreakable. People ask me, how did I do it? I never could give an answer, because I was so trauma driven. It's easy not to listen. It's easy to plow over people. It's easy to have that energy and show up and win. It takes a lot more effort to hold space and listen and be still and say, so if I had to go back and set records as a business lobbyist again, I mean, I wouldn't even know I wouldn't know how to do it. But my first awakening was, I was debilitated by migraines. I mean, debilitated. Um, 10 days a month in the hospital, off the curve. So I sought holistic alternatives. So I went to a clinic up in Victoria, Canada with Dr. Greenwood, a holistic doctor who is doing all kinds of crazy therapies and I'm like and modalities. And I'm like, where have I landed for 10 days? But I remember being on a yoga mat doing some form of acupuncture and flying off the yoga mat and saying, I don't think I'm a Republican. Now, it didn't matter what denomination I was. It mattered. I didn't have any clue. I wasn't my own authority. I didn't even have an idea of how I showed up in the world, what was driving me. What I was doing was making sure that the generations before me, which were very John Birch Society women who had made a lot, that they were proud of me, that I was doing exactly what a good soldier would do. So that I didn't, it took me another 10 years before I really understood when I flew off that yoga mat and said that, and everyone laughed. And then I said, and I think we're having an earthquake. And they said, oh, she's from California. And there actually was a huge earthquake. But the fact is I think we wake up in stages. And I look back on that moment where I identified and didn't even realize the importance of understanding that I didn't know what drove me, why I was getting sick, what the body had to do with my emotional state. And now, I mean, I don't suffer from migraines anymore. And I was on permanent disability. I couldn't function. Um, and they were severe. And people think that, well, if you're emotionally don't have that, so was it physically not happen? No, physically it was very real. But I understand now the emotional components that fed it, and that what linked and kept me sick,
Yeah.
and what it was anchored into.
Yeah. That's it. The awareness around that link between our thoughts and beliefs and that how it transforms
Yeah.
in our physical body is becoming a much more well-known subject. It's a fantastic thing, but also often a puzzling thing because
It was so funny because this is on my desk today, Heal Your Body by Louise Hayes. And well, when I started this work, I was very drawn to her work, mirror work. I use it a lot in my coaching practice now. But when I found out that we were born on the same day, the same hour, it took me a long time to get the details. I knew we had the same birthdays. We were both Libras and we were both October 8th. But when I found out the deeper connection, I realized that she was very much present and guiding me. And as an intuitive that I embraced later on, that I resisted early on, which kept me not trusting myself over and over and over again. But she's a huge, and her work, listening to the body and connecting, it's just never wrong.
Yeah, I've got one of her books sitting here. I've got a great stack, but there's
I'm looking right at it ahead of me. Yeah, she's amazing, and it was life-shifting work.
Yeah, it is.
Life affirming. Yeah.
Interesting, when we think about the beliefs and thoughts that we take on just from our environment. So, like football's a massive thing here in Australia. And so like,
Yeah.
what political party you follow and the football team that you follow and the religion you have and like all the things that we just roll out of childhood into adulthood and carry forward until there's some kind of interruption. And it's really interesting, as a life coach, you would be very aware of the struggle that women have when you ask them, like, what do you want? It's like, well, I don't want, and I don't want, and I don't want, and I don't want, and this feels uncomfortable. I'm not sure about this.
Yeah.
You want to say, actually, what I want is surprisingly challenging.
Right. What I usually do is flip that into what feels like love. I want them to drop into the alchemist, to the soul. I want them to take the ego mask off that has served them so well in the world. Yeah, that has served them so well in the world, that and be grateful for those pieces of you that protected you, that honored you. But at this point, what feels like love? Because the soul doesn't recognize attack, judgment, any of those things. And it's about expansion. It's about holding space for what's right about this, not what we don't want, but what do we truly want? And if I do a live event and people go up to the microphone, they better be ready to claim what they really want, because I'm not going to stop until I get the truth, because it's so important for women to claim their truth. And a lot of times, just like I didn't know what my truth was, we don't know what our truth is until we, like you said, when we hit this catalyst. For me, it probably was 46. I was going through menopause and I didn't know it. It was like hitting a brick wall, sliding down it. My life imploded. Everything blew up. There was just the perfect storm. And I couldn't survive in the world that I had created anymore. I would have died if I would have continued the medication, the starvation, the perfect weight. It was killing me.
Yeah. So you founded a company, a health. Tell us about that. How did that? Is that what came from this?
Well, inadvertently it did. I had, I felt like the perfection had to be, and I'm tall, and to be 100, if I hit 130, interesting, a migraine would happen. I would have hyperemesis where I'd vomit for days, and oh, wait a minute, I'd be under 130 pounds again. So it's amazing the cycle I was in. But when I started to heal my weight, I started gaining weight and I was absolutely horrified of what was happening because I was losing control. But at the same time, I wanted to love myself and I didn't know how. I didn't even know I didn't love myself. I was so out of touch with every piece of myself that I just wanted peace. And that's all I wanted to claim was peace. So I gained probably 60 pounds, which probably put me at somewhat of a healthier weight. But I wanted to get healthy again. And I was always a whole foods eater. I loved whole foods. I loved growing vegetables, canning. It's always been a very big part of my life. Recipes, creating them. So I went and I wanted to lose some weight and get healthy. And there was this recipe for cauliflower pizza crust. And I made it and it was complicated and soggy. And I'm like, this could be, and I loved pizza. I thought, and I love food. I thought this could be really good if I jazzed it up. So I started playing with it. And then I found a process that I could mass produce. It was complicated, difficult, expensive, but we did it. Brought in a partner who in return took the company all the way. My first 2 years was creating, collaborating, coming up with cauliflower foods, which has now just been in January taken over by a very big company. It's no longer cauliflower foods like it had been the last 7 years, but it became $1 billion industry and company. And I'm so proud of that company. But it was about wanting pizza and a really good ready-made 4-ingredient. And I love to keep it simple. 4 fresh ingredients, keep it simple. And I still do that to this day. When people want to come in and complicate and layer up their stories, I look at how can we look at this and simplify? How can we simplify? Because people want it, they're geared for making it complicated. There's an easy way and a hard way. And I think the soul wants the easy way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And finding ways for us to eat whole,
Healthy. Yeah.
amazing, beautiful food. It's just, this is
Yeah.
a whole other conversation, but I can't resist going there a little bit. But it's
Yeah.
in Australia now, it is so much more expensive to eat than to eat just rubbish. It has gone crazy. It has gone quite mad.
Well, even here in California, where I live in Northern California, the most beautiful, I'm in the middle of, Napa Valley, the farm industries. I have an amazing farmer's market. It is expensive. If I look at what I bought 5 years ago to what I'm buying now, purchasing now, it's very expensive. But I am devoted to, I get busted a lot for saying organic. This is organic, but I also have my own garden and grow it myself. I just picked 50 pounds of elderberries where I'll go up and I will can those with my mom. We'll cook them down. It's a whole day event. But I love creating that. It's multi-dimensional. It's not just what we get out of it. It's the process of doing it and canning it. And it's so rewarding. And I know what's in it. I know what's in my food.
It's that connection. But the other part of
Yeah.
it is the home environment, bringing women together to preserve foods and canned foods, and
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
whole culture that goes with it that's so rich that
Oh,
I don't want
well, when I first did my first Italy retreat, I mean, here I'm in this beautiful villa in the middle of Firenze, above Tuscany. And I decided, I have no idea what I was thinking, that I would not hire the chef for morning and lunchtime. And I'm coaching and I'm running all over to Venice and train. I was going to cook. So I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I didn't know Fahrenheit. I didn't know how to read Italian. I don't speak Italian. I had them, I picked out foods and it was nothing. I'm like, I didn't even know I'm like, gosh, what am I going to do with all? So I called in the women that had cooked in that 15th century kitchen before me at 4 a.m. And I said, help a girl out here. And I made the most incredible food, stuffed pears, quiches, stuffed blossoms. It eventually came down to the group of women said, can we just, I had no idea I would cook like that, but that I did a clarity board and that should have told me because there was cooking and 6 cities all over it. And that's what I ended up doing. But I ended up letting the chef go at night due to the fact they just wanted my food. So it was so healing and so connective. These women, I'm still connected. My first retreat, still connected because of cooking together, because of the food.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I'm desperately want to keep going on this tangent, but I'm going to pull this back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's all good.
I'm going to pull this back because, I
Yeah.
really want to get an essence of what has carved you into the woman that you are today, the beautiful, extraordinary woman that is sitting here, because it's when we can hear stories and tell stories and connect with stories about my mum
Right.
was this way or my dad was this way and these were the personality types that I saw as normal, and so
Right.
there was obviously a lot of trauma in you leaving home at 16 and your parents breaking up. How did
Right.
that in relationships for you that evolved from there?
Well, they divorced when I was 6. So I bounced back and forth between both homes. A mom who was married a lot, um, looked like Elizabeth Taylor, behaved a little bit like Elizabeth Taylor. Doesn't mean she wasn't a good mom. I have a different relationship. I don't judge how she showed up because she had a lot of trauma. And I think she did her very best, but it left me very abandoned. And I had a father that was a safer parent, believe it or not. And he was an alcoholic who was functional, and interestingly enough, I was always relatively safe there where my other siblings weren't. There were 5 of us, and 4 siblings there. I was the one I wasn't the brunt of the violence or the outbursts, which kept me a little isolated, but didn't stop the trauma and growing up an adult child of an alcoholic. So the messages I got were very mixed. And going into the world, my skill sets felt like none. My survival skills, 100%. Um, when people had something they needed me to step into, I'm like, I handle trauma really well. Let me do it for you. I was full on. And now it's like, oh no, I'm not, I wouldn't step into that now. But that's where I felt the most empowered. And that's where I think I got my power, was overcoming obstacles and helping people in very difficult situations. And I look at that now and I think, wow, that was so much energy,
Yeah.
so much energy. So I think the healing came um, in my 40s with menopause, where I understood that I was no longer able to hold myself together. I was actually deconstructing on my own. I
Yeah.
was I was in relationships with my daughters that, as much as I loved them, I would give them everything, and then because they weren't grateful, I'd scream. And I mean, I was creating so much trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a very a difficult relationship with my mum from 13 to 50. It was a very tumultuous relationship. And
Yeah.
it was, and there was a lot of victim speak from my side, but it was Brene
Yeah.
Brown's something that just like a little key in my, I mean, she said lots of
Gotta love Brene Brown. She's incredible.
you can never love anybody else more than you love yourself. And it was just then I realized,
That aha moment.
that was,
Yeah.
and it was like, it's not that she didn't want to, she just didn't know how.
You just couldn't. Yeah.
And it was also an aha for me. It's like, well, actually, the work is falling more in love with myself so I can be more in love with my children. I feel like
Right.
possibly love my children more, but I want to love and love and love and love them more. And it starts, yeah.
Yeah, but don't you think that no matter how much we love them, and I mean, I have 3 daughters that I live and die, I love them. I do anything for them. But what they were watching and what I see they're in their healing now is they were watching me love myself or not love myself. They were watching me get on the scale every day and say, you're so fat at 130. They were looking at me in my unlovable, in my shame, in my, and how I showed up. I'm not smart enough. I may never have said I'm not smart enough, but I showed up. And that's what I led with. No matter what I achieved, no matter what anyone said, no matter how many records I set in the corporate world, my story was I'm not smart enough. And every time I would peak and set unbelievable records, including in the health industry, I would self-sabotage. So if anyone's listening to this and can resonate with that, like, I don't know why I do what I do, there was no self-worth. I couldn't hold space for that woman. It was like, oh no, that was a fluke. You couldn't have done that. That just can never happen again. And I actually didn't understand why, but it was very comfortable to be back at the bottom and then fight my way back. That was comfortable. So I really recognize now the stories versus the truth. The truth can be now uncomfortable because I'm out here and I've not lived it yet. But the stories are very comfortable. And when you rub up against that trauma bond or the trauma that may prevent, and it could just be something as simple as newness. Whenever I come up against something new in my business, maybe it might be $1 million this year. I think, who are you to claim $1 million? The story, you're not smart enough. You're not good with money. I have to say, oh, wait a minute. And I have a pink velvet chair next to me. And I always tell, now you're going to sit over there and watch me. So I often talk to my inner child, my inner self, my inner critic and say, there's no space for you today. And I don't have to do that very often, but when there's a stretch goal or there's something big or there's something frightening, there can be this next level and we don't know. And we're making all these changes. And all of a sudden, perhaps something happens and we second guess ourselves. And I have to hold space and think, no, I remember this. That's in the maze. It's very familiar. I've run that gamut many times, and I'm big on universal laws. I think the law of polarity, if the desire is there, then the answer is always available to us. So I run those universal laws all day long, and the stories don't fit into universal laws. The truth does. So that keeps me moving forward. Versus over here, the stories will keep me looping and looping and looping. And they're so familiar and they can be, they're no longer a lesson. It's like, I should know better at this point. It's like, no, you identify.
I think of it for myself, I think of it like the mother archetype. So not mothering
Yeah.
mother, it's that wise, boundaries clear. And it's then the inner child is like, it's okay. You can be scared.
Yeah.
Just,
You can be scared. I've got you. I often say, this is my favorite line. Do you trust me? Do you trust me? Um, and many times I didn't get an answer, but now it's a yes. I trust you. And I had a dream. I don't know how many years ago it was, maybe a decade. And I actually autoed it on my phone immediately before I forgot it. I woke up in tears. I was sobbing and I thought, oh, I've just had a visit. And I've only had a few visits in my dreams. One is my dad drowned when I was in my 30s, and it was quite traumatic. He was finally sober. He was 56 um, he was so effervescent. I loved him. Being an alcoholic didn't change my love or relationship to him. And I was so excited to spend more time with him. But I had this dream. Now he's come and visit, but this dream was me coming and visiting. And I'm knocking on this door and I recognize it's me. And I recognize that it's me answering the door. And I see that I'm in the ocean and I love the water. I'm very drawn to the ocean when I need to heal. Many of my cathartic moments or where my breakthroughs have happened have been just not crying ocean energy. But I recognize that she's grabbed my hands and she says, I'm so grateful for you. And I woke up with her and it's so emotional now. I want to cry because she was so grateful for me for doing the work for carrying all the years of you didn't think you could make it. And I did.
And you still are.
Yeah. And I still am. And even at this age, I'm just now publishing my book. I'm just now, I look at this as just a jumping off point that I built this, and what's coming is the universe has something so much bigger than I can possibly dream or create. I leave that very wide open. I try not to put expectations on my limitations. It's like, oh no, you know much bigger and better than what I can create. Just guide me. I trust.
I shared yesterday in one of the interviews that I just heard a story from a woman who retired at 67 and spent a little bit of time traveling, and then was like, I've got like 12 years of work that I could do. And she went out and did nursing and started a new career as a nurse at 70. I was like, you're my kind of woman.
I love that. And you know what, Edwina? I find I coach women as young as in their 20s. It's amazing. I have someone 72 right now who is a neurophysicist, an optometrist. She's starting a new life. She wants to feel and do different things. It's amazing that women are claiming that it ain't over. We can do whatever we want, but we have to claim it. If we don't claim it and say, this is what I want, then we start activating. It's like all of a sudden we say we want it. It's like, oh, what did you say? And then it starts showing up and we're like, oh, look at all these synchronicities. No, it's guided. We called it in. We have to believe it.
And this ties back to the belief systems that we can carry from earliest days right the way through. And I did a series,
yes,
a little go called More Extraordinary Every Day, which was in defiance of the programming of inevitable decline. So we kind of hit 50, and then society wants to say, well, it's all downhill from here.
Yeah. Well, I'm defying that. I'm not buying that at all. I'm just at a new jumping off point. It'll be 60 this year in October. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. I'm going to be physically strong. I'm claiming health is number one. I am claiming, again, I think with trauma, and when we carry unhealed trauma, we're going to find an outlet somewhere, and for me, I would work. I've got clients all over the world, and my work ethics, I thought, oh, my work ethics are so good. Well, I was hiding behind work. I mean, I was 2 o'clock in the morning all the way on. And then I would say, oh, I'm going to have to do takeout. I guess I'll have to do Thai food tonight, and no exercise, takeout, back in the morning to up at 2. And here was my world until I finally said I can't continue this. I claimed after Italy this year, I did 2 VIPs back to back in October. I had a lot of loss while I was there. My children lost their father. He had a blood clot that flying back from New Zealand. It was just, they lost their grandma, they lost their father. And all of that shifted me into, it was like a little wake up call that they can't afford to lose me. My health has to come first. And I had taken 3 falls in Italy, and I thought, I'm tripping, I'm falling, I'm exhausted, I'm pushing too hard. And this year, outside of a few keynotes where I'm traveling, I'm not showing up. I'm not going to Italy this year. I'm not hosting retreats. I'm showing up for me. Everything is about my health first. Every day I walk 4 to 6 miles, and nothing comes before that. The minute we end here, I'm out of here. I've already got my workout pants on, and I'm out the door. And now we like here in California.
Yeah.
It's lighter longer.
I would love to go back to actually there's so many things that I want to touch on. One of the things that I find is so important is understanding where our soul settles, and you've covered it in that it's by the ocean for you. For some people it's in the mountains, for some people, for me, it's green rolling hills. There's something about driving in the most beautiful coastal area. But when I just that kind of unwind, I drive inland and I've got to see green rolling hills. And there's something that allows
nature
to settle. Well, it's absolutely nature, but it's more than that, because I get the same ocean. But some people find it in the ocean. But I think it's so important. I just want to touch on that it's so important that you know that yourself.
And I think we do know. I mean, I think what you said, it goes back to childhood. I remember going, and where I go to the ocean is where I went as a child, where we had a cabin, where the beach I played on. I still go there. Um, there I hike there, but more importantly, I heal there. I'm able to unpack. It touches me on such a deep level. And I did a video for myself. I went through a very big betrayal. I mean, my core wound is safety. The secondary was betrayal. I called him betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. And my second marriage, I was betrayed. For another day. It's big. It's a big story to unpack. He forfeited his medical license. It was huge. I remember going to the ocean and laying on the cliff and looking at the water coming in and out, the ebb and flow, and just sobbing. And I decided to do this video for me to remember what this felt like, this despair. And I asked myself, does this feel like love? And it didn't. None of it felt like love. And I videotaped a short part of, I was there for days and hours on that cliff, but just maybe a minute. And I posted that with a little prefix this year on a video to show people what grief looks like. It's messy. I mean, my eyes are swollen shut. I've got snot all over. And you know what? It's real. And this is what it looks like when we heal. And this is what it looks like when we fall apart and when we shatter and we don't know where to turn. But I connected to that ocean and I stayed there. And that held space for me when I didn't have any clue of where I belonged, what I was connected to. My truth of this partner wasn't who I thought he was. I thought, and having daughters, it was like, what's happening here? But it was the beginning of the greatest gift of healing. The biggest pain. I mean, I smashed every boot in my house. I took baseball bats. I broke my hand. I epically fell apart. It was mind blowing what I went through. It was legal. It was public. It was humiliating. And I held space for all of that. But I held space for myself to grow and to not have any shame that I did anything wrong, that I trusted. And I called someone in to teach me how to love myself fully, completely. And finally, in my 50s, I said, I love myself completely, fully. I come first, which before I would have said that was selfish. I would teach that, but didn't really fully believe it. Now it is embedded in me.
Yeah, it's, oh my gosh, I wish we had a couple of hours. There's so many things here that I just, every now and then I see posts from people about don't trust people that haven't done, like certain certifications in life coaching. And I'm not making that right or wrong. But when I listen to your story, it's like these stories, women that have been through experiences like you've been through, find a way to come out the other side. This is where we learn from. It is these stories. And my first husband walked away. I had 4 children under 8 when he just literally packed a bag and left. And the grief of that period. I'll never forget somebody saying to me, why do you keep calling it grief? Nobody died. And it's like,
oh, the grief, the betrayal, the loss of the belief and the love of what you believed in. It's huge. It's huge.
It was one of the greatest gifts of my life. Yeah. It was the greatest gifts of my life in hindsight, not in the moment. But
not in the moment.
But I had to, it made me grow up. I realized at that point that I was really childish in many ways. And it was an enormous gift in my life. So, yeah.
It's probably why we connected and why I leaned into you and it was like in my mind as an intuitive, I see women and there's sometimes it happens like this, boom. And with you, it was like that, boom. And I'm like, ooh, there's we're intertwined.
Yeah.
We go way back, not just this, we go way back. And you're right about the life coaching. Yes, I have degrees and thousands of hours of coaching, but that isn't what allows me to lead and teach and hold space. It is what I have chosen to heal from that allows me to see women clearly and see what it is they're truly saying and what they really need. They may show up and say, I want to build a business and I want to do this. And I'm like, And so tell me about how you feel about that. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Oh, well, there we go. I just hit a nerve. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got time to go a little bit longer?
Oh, absolutely. It's end of the day here. It's end of the day here. And I decided I was going to show up and be as vulnerable. Anything you asked, I was going to be available to. There was nothing that I was going to filter, because if we can, you holding this series, if I can resonate, so my story can resonate with just one woman who can say, I'm going through that, and can see what it looks like on the other side of healing. And we're going to continue to heal forever. It's never like this finished product of like, I've arrived, I'm complete. I thought that at first. I'm like, woo, no.
Like polishing the silver, it has to be polished.
Exactly.
So I think there's two topics here that we can dive into a bit deeper if you're happy to, that are just so
Sure.
One is weight and one is addiction. Let's look at weight first, because you brought this up a couple of times. And
Yeah.
one of these conversations that has the potential to push all sorts of buttons. And I'll preface
Yeah.
it, I have been on a diet for 30 something years, and I'm a naturopath and I've done functional nutrition and I know about food. And, so this is not about being high and mighty. This is like a journey. But the conversation that I think that we need to have as women is that weight is not about aesthetics. We're not bashing people for how they look. What I care about is my health and the health of women everywhere, because we know excess weight leads to cancers and all sorts of chronic illnesses, and with our hormones through menopause and perimenopause.
Yeah.
So what's your experience? What's your thoughts? How do you think about this in your communities?
It's interesting. I was always an athlete. I was tall and skinny until my hormones hit. I was just lengthy and awkward and a tomboy. And then within one summer, I think it was my junior year, I was a late bloomer. I went from complete tomboy, skinny, nothing, being teased about not being developed, to double D breasts, a waist like this, and hips. The stretch mark, I was devastated. No more gymnastics. I didn't know what to do in this body. I didn't know how to show up. I was so young emotionally. I wasn't ready to date. Men, not boys, men were, I was attracting them. I didn't know how to deal with any of that. I was terrified. I was positively terrified. I think the weight gain was twofold. I remember eating a graham cracker once with peanut butter and jelly on it. We always had fresh fruits and vegetables. We had graham crackers that day. We never had any processed food in the house. And I'm like, oh, a graham cracker. And my mom said, you better be careful, those hips. And boom, those hips. I mean, I have been fixated on these hips since that 15-year-old comment that I'm sure she just said, you don't want those hips that we have in our generation. So that immediately dropped in. And then I think subconsciously there was a layer. If I gained a little bit of weight, I had a layer of protection. I wouldn't be so sexy. I wouldn't be so vulnerable. And food, I wasn't an overeater, but if I look back on it, my weight yo-yoed from the time I was 16. I mean, I remember my stepmom making me fast and me being terrified and eating loaves of bread in the closet because I couldn't fast at that age. I was starving. But I had, it was, she had this idea that if I lost 10 pounds, but instead I gained 20. So there was a form of self-sabotage in that too. So I was never ready for relationships. So I think the weight kept me protected. But if I look at how I showed up in the world, it was like this. Even the years of the medication, and we can introduce the medication for the migraines, kept me very lean because I was sick from the medication. I had never drank in my life. I was a control freak. No drugs, no smoking, no alcohol. And then a prescription drug they give me to stop the pain works. Well, it makes me sick, but it controls my weight because I'm throwing up. So it kind of serves a purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I look back on that at the time, no one could have ever told me that. But I look back on it and I can see the weight control. I can see the dynamics. And when I started to get healthy and the weight expanded, then I created the healthy food and then I lost. And then when I went through the trauma, I laid down and gained again. Now it's taking me all these years to focus on, even though I lived a relatively healthy lifestyle, now I'm focused on health. Whatever weight I land at that feels healthy, where I feel I'm at my strongest, that's all I care about. But I've had damage along the way. All those years of medication, I got an infection in my legs, 17 forms of staph. I almost lost my legs. It doesn't come without trauma. People look and say, "You've got such a great life. Look at they have no idea what my life really looks like or what I deal with or what I share. Usually it's with my clients I will share because they have an idea of you wouldn't understand. Well, try me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the food is definitely something that came in to protect, but I'm looking at the relationship and the insulation, I think, and the comfort.
Yeah, it's a comfort is a big thing, and it plays into the addiction conversation as well.
Yes.
Really finding something that just kind of releases the pressure of the agitation of whatever's going on in here.
Well, yeah. And if we go further, because you go all the way back, if I think about my first relationship to comforting myself, I remember riding the bus and I was 10 years old and we would stop at this little country store where we let someone off. And the bus driver always allowed me, I always had a quarter, and I would get off the bus, run into the store and get 25 cents worth of Jolly Ranchers, blow pots, some kind of candy. And I would fill up where my reeds went in my violin case. I was always first chair violin. I was first chair violin because I would sit in my room and have candy and play for hours. But that candy is what got me through very stressful, emotional my home life. But every time I went to my mother's for the last 20 years, I would stop. And it was one day I just woke up. I just said, why am I pulling in to the dollar store and getting $30 worth of candy? And I would every time. I never touched it, but it was there for safety in the back seat. Every kind of fruit candy there was, right back to that violin case where I filled it up with Jolly Ranchers, blow pops, little gumdrops. I loved fruity candy. Wasn't big on chocolate, but the comfort there through all the yelling and trauma in that house, that brought me comfort in my room with my music. Still love music, still love the violin. But I woke up one day and I said, I don't need this candy. And I now go to my mom's house. I recognize where I stopped. She lives at a ranch. I've got to drive about an hour and a half. And I think, I don't need because I don't need anything from her anymore. I understand that I love me and I accept her for who she is. And there is no conflict anymore. I don't need anything from her. I don't need the candy to soothe me, not even hypothetically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, when we can make the connection with where these things start and just kind of little energetic.
Cut the energy cord and the shame that came with it. I would lie in the store and say I was doing a birthday party or something because they would say, "Oh, this is a lot of candy." So I would lie about it. "Oh, yes, getting ready for a party and children." I was doing it, and I donated it a lot of times to a homeless shop, wherever, or Halloween. It would sit there for a long time, but there was so much shame with it. Like, what, and if I ate it, double down shame.
Yeah. And it's perpetuated. You know, we see memes
Oh
on
yeah.
mum shutting herself in the cupboard with a candy bar, and it's like,
Yeah.
but don't tell the kids. And you're like, it's
Yeah.
perpetuated everywhere. And
Right.
it really does tie back into this conversation of addiction, which is obviously something that you were, it was in your environment right from day.
Right.
But you know, I feel like the more that we can talk about addiction, from it's way more than alcohol and cigarettes,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
you know, like now we've got
And
our
Edwina, if we look at it, the infection in my legs came from 20,000 milligrams of Demerol a month. And I was because I got the right to not go in the hospital anymore and inject that at home. I had no business to, I had no idea the world I was entering into, but I'm married to a practitioner and I thought it was safe. I looked towards him. He was the authority. Am I going to be okay? Are my legs okay? It was one day that I smelled something that didn't smell right. And I went into immediate care where he worked and I said, something's not right. And he swabbed my legs and came back. I was over on the coast and he said, you need to come back. He was very calm. And I had 17 forms of staph in my legs. I almost lost my legs and I ignored it because I didn't want anyone to see what was going on.
yeah.
And they'll always be, I've lost muscle. They'll always be scarred. People, when I do pedicures, they say, ooh, did you have a shotgun hit your legs? It's amazing what people unfiltered will say. And I own it. I own it. No, I had an infection in my legs. But it will be in my book. It took me years to take ownership of that because I was fighting for I had no addiction because addiction looks like that. I have a prescription medication. I'm doing it by the rules. I'm doing it exactly what they've given me. I'm not breaking any rules. So I fought for that position until I finally surrendered and said,
Yeah.
I don't know. The line is blurred between emotional and physical. And if I didn't take the medicine, I would probably be using food. And that is the truth.
Yeah.
That is the truth.
I did a series. I was very inspired by a book called Lost Connections by Johan Hari. Have you come across that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I was so inspired by it that I did an interview series, you know, based on the principles of that last year, and the connection, obviously, you know,
Yeah.
is a loss of connection, whether it's connection to people, connection to the natural world, connection to ourselves, you know, like we can use this connection as a central pillar. And it's just these conversations that unlock that little something. You know, I had two women in my community that had been on antidepressants for, I think one was 20, one was 15 years or something. And they were just like,
Mm.
I actually don't remember the last time my doctor asked me if I'm still depressed.
Right.
Just keep handing out the prescription.
Yeah. Yeah. We could do a whole series on what's prescribed and and how they're checking in and how overloaded they are. But I think it's so important, you brought that up, that we connect with ourselves. Oftentimes we're connect with the opinions of other people. If I show them, then they won't see, their filter on how they see us is not our responsibility. I love the 4 agreements for that reason. And also how you see me is not my responsibility. I am who I am and I take ownership of that. And I can't show up in the world to make sure people see me. And this is sometimes working on Zoom, they see this and they have this idea of you. And that is not my responsibility that they don't ask or see. I'm transparent. I will actually show up in every single area, but we have to stay connected to our truth, not the stories people create about us.
I'm dying to read your book, and I feel like we're going to do more together, Dana. I feel like there's
Oh, Edwina, absolutely. I just signed the contract. I just did it this morning and I said, okay, let's go. I wanted to be ready. It's been 7 years in the making. The cookbook with cauliflower foods that came out was no longer my intellectual, but it became everything I wanted to do. I waited. I played the waiting game. I'll wait, I'll wait, I'll wait. Now there's no more waiting. This book, I'm not waiting for the number one book. This book will be my truth. And then the next book I can see being an expansion of that. But for women out there, I just don't wait. If you feel the call to do it, do it.
and it's in our stories, you know, when you talk
It's in
to
our stories.
developing very young and the attraction of men. And it just, like, I've never shared this out loud before, but when I was 13, I had an 18-year-old boyfriend. And that was, like, I'm very big busted. I think when my milk came in with my babies, I was an 8J. And I remember going into the store and they were like, I don't know that we make this size. It's a freak size. But
Yeah, but look at that. How you attracted that. And I want to say you were a baby, but I mean, that's, I was still hanging off trees and, and we're not emotionally ready, but we've got these bodies that we call in and it sets up this, for me, terror that actually called in a lot from that point forward. And if we couple that with worthiness or lack of worthiness, and we're getting our value out there, it can be a very dangerous, slippery slope on where our value is and how the shame that can be compiled on top of that. And, if I could just share one thing for women to forgive themselves for what they didn't know. It's like when we know better, we're required to do better, but you didn't know. You did the very best you could under the circumstances. And that's all you're required to do. Universal law, that's all you're required to do. Forgive yourself.
And I do absolutely 100% subscribe to the notion that life is happening for us. All of these lessons are, like, they're all experiences that we learn something from that we can then pass
Yeah.
on. I talk about my kids as the new and improved versions. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, so it's all perfect. It's all divine timing, even the really, really, really tough stuff. So I am so grateful to you for sharing your story with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I subscribe to that too. It's divine timing. There's, if we resist anything, we attract more of it. And our soul, it's like we have to ask ourselves, there's no mistakes. It's what's perfect about all of this because it's happening for us, not to us. And that will grow and elevate us. Otherwise, we're just stuck in that loop of coulda, shoulda, woulda. And I call it the no growth zone.
Yeah.
So ownership is powerful.
And for the women that are tuning into this live and for those that catch it on replay, I hope that you take the opportunity to imagine you're sitting around a kitchen table with Dana and I listening to these stories, what you would share and what you would add and what you see in your own life. Because the more that we connect with each other with this lens of compassion, that we're all made of strength and struggle, we're all made of, amazing, rich stories. And the more that we can share these stories with each other, the more we all grow.
I love the fact you just said that, Edwina. I say it every day. Who's at your kitchen table? Who do you want to talk to? Who brings you comfort? Who do you connect with? And visualizing that of the other women that are connected to us right now and are leaning in and can understand or resonate or needed this message, it's powerful. And it's never us speaking to anyone. It's connecting to them and elevating them and letting them know they're not alone. We're all connected. We're all connected.
You and I will find a really big kitchen table somewhere between here and where you are and invite women to join us.
Well, I've always wanted to go to Australia.
Come.
Big tables are there. I have a lot of clients there. Maybe I'm coming to Australia. Maybe you're coming back to the States.
Yeah, it's been a while. I haven't been back since 2019. So maybe we'll do it twice. Once there and once here.
I don't know. I just know we're not done with this yet.
We're not.
Yeah.
You've got a beautiful, beautiful gift for the women that are tuning into this. Did you want to take a second to let them know what that is? The gratitude journal.
Oh, yes. Yes. The gift. Oh, yes. I have created a gratitude journal and it's free. It's available to them. I think it's 100 pages. It's actually a daily journal with quotes so they can drop in because I believe gratitude shifts us back into our present moment. It allows us to move forward versus caught in our stories again. If we're every day, and be specific download this journal, write a specific thing you're grateful for, and the gratitude will transform you into this beautiful new story of moving you forward. And it should be a daily practice, I think, if you desire change. if you desire. And I think everyone does. But gratitude, I call it just the magic in our lives that keeps us present.
When we can find, in theme with this, when we can find the gratitude for the struggles, that's when
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. When you said that, I was kind of daydreaming, and I'm like, oh yes, gratitude journal gift. Yes. Yes. Download it. It's free, and it's my gift to everyone.
It's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Dana.
Oh, this was so, I just love connecting with you. I love your energy.
Thank you so much. All right, gorgeous women, that's it from us for now. We will be back with another interview, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time tonight. All right, so much love, and bye for now.
Bye, everyone.